Tired of feeling overwhelmed by your to-do list? Wondering why even small tasks can feel like climbing a mountain in flip-flops? You're not alone. Every evening, you might promise yourself tomorrow will be different, productive, focused, maybe even satisfying. And yet, when the next day rolls around, somehow, scrolling wins again. You probably won't know this, but procrastination isn't really about laziness, it's about disconnection. Disconnection from the moment, from your body, from the why behind your work. That's where mindfulness comes in. There's a powerful connection between mindfulness and overcoming procrastination. This story reveals the secrets to harnessing that link for greater focus and success. We'll explore how slowing down your breath can speed up your progress, how simply noticing your thoughts can change your behavior, and how awareness becomes the doorway to action. Procrastination is holding you back from achieving your dreams? Let's not dress that up, it is. But this isn't a guilt trip. This is an invitation to take back control. And not in a drill sergeant, cold shower at 5 a.m. sort of way. In a gentler, notice your breath before you open your inbox kind of way. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. You start by picturing your to-do list, not the one you wrote, but the one floating like a mental cloud. Unfinished emails, overdue forms, a bookshelf you swore you'd organize last summer. Each item floats in vague tension. But right now, in this moment, you're not doing any of it. You're just here. You're listening. You're breathing. And that shift, right there, is the beginning of the antidote. When you bring mindfulness into this picture, something subtle but important changes. You're not battling your to-do list anymore. You're noticing it. You're watching your resistance rise and fall like waves, instead of being dragged under by it. Mainstream psychology agrees, mindfulness is a powerful tool in behavioral change. In a 2016 study published in Mindfulness, researchers found that increased trait mindfulness predicted reduced procrastination among university students. The more aware and non-judgmental people were of their present moment experiences, the less likely they were to delay tasks. It's not a magic wand, but it's a real lever. Just a quirky detail: in Tibetan monastic training, monks are sometimes instructed to sweep the same patch of floor for hours. Not because it's dirty, but because noticing the impulse to stop, to fidget, to move on, becomes part of the discipline. That sounds suspiciously like your relationship with Excel spreadsheets, doesn't it? So what is mindfulness, really? You hear the term everywhere now. Apps, mugs, maybe even your dentist. But in essence, it's simple. Mindfulness is paying attention, on purpose, to the present moment, with curiosity and without judgment. It's not about clearing your mind, that's a myth that refuses to die. It's about seeing clearly what's already in there. Even the messy bits. Here's something interesting: your brain loves novelty. It craves distraction not because you're weak, but because evolution wired you to scan for saber-toothed threats, or TikToks. Same mechanism. Mindfulness turns that attention inward instead. It gives your brain something else to notice: your breath, your posture, the feel of your hands on your lap, and that, weirdly, makes it easier to stay. You sit with the urge to avoid a task, and suddenly, the task feels smaller. You name the feeling: dread, boredom, discomfort, and you realize it's not permanent. It's just a visitor. And like all visitors, it eventually leaves. Of course, there remains considerable disagreement about what mindfulness really means in Western versus Eastern contexts. Some scholars argue that we've reduced it to a productivity hack, an ironic twist, considering its Buddhist roots. Others suggest that even secular mindfulness still retains its transformative essence. Either way, what matters is how you relate to it. Let's bring this back to your day. Imagine you're staring at a half-written email. You know you should finish it. But instead, you feel a weight behind your eyes. Maybe a sigh escapes before you even realize it. This is your cue. Instead of fighting it, try this: Pause. Place your hand on your belly. Feel the breath rise. Drop your shoulders. Feel the chair beneath you. Name what's happening, resistance. And then, only then, ask yourself if you want to take the next step. Sometimes the answer is no. That's okay. Mindfulness doesn't promise endless hustle. It just keeps you honest. You stop pretending the problem is external, the email, the task, the time. You see it's internal. You meet it with awareness. And in doing so, you reclaim a bit of freedom. Another odd but true fact, during a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat, participants are asked to not speak, read, or write. One participant described the sudden urge to alphabetize leaves on the ground just to do something. Your brain resists stillness like a cat resists bathwater. But that's where the real stuff bubbles up. You won't always be mindful. No one is. You'll forget. You'll go back to doom scrolling or rearranging your desk supplies. That's not failure, it's practice. Every time you notice you've wandered, and gently return, you strengthen your focus muscle. It's like a bicep curl for your attention span. But with less sweat and fewer gym bros. As your awareness grows, your reactivity shrinks. You stop getting yanked around by every little, should, or, later, in your mind. Instead, you sit down, maybe just for 5 minutes, and do the next right thing. Not because you're in the mood. Not because you've had an espresso. But because you're present, and presence is powerful. So tonight, you begin not with a planner, but with presence. Not with panic, but with pause. You'll still have a to-do list tomorrow. But now, maybe it won't feel so loud. That gentle shift in your inner landscape, away from fight or flight and toward conscious engagement, sets the tone for everything that comes next. Because when you meet your tasks with curiosity instead of dread, something changes. You begin to work with your brain instead of against it. That calm breath, that noticed sigh, that one small action. That's how it starts. You wake up and you already feel behind. You haven't even brushed your teeth, and yet your brain is doing a slow-motion slideshow of every task you've been avoiding. It's like your to-do list followed you into your dreams and is now judging you from the foot of your bed. What's going on in your head when this happens? Why does procrastination feel less like a choice and more like something your brain just does to you? Let's talk about your brain on delay mode. It's not just you. The human brain is wired in ways that make procrastination weirdly logical. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive center, is the part responsible for planning, attention, and regulating impulses. It's like the sensible adult in your head. Unfortunately, it's constantly at odds with your limbic system, the emotional, impulsive part that would rather you eat ice cream and binge cat videos than write that report. When you feel anxiety about a task, maybe it feels boring, unclear, or just hard, your limbic system jumps in and says, "Oh, look, Instagram. Let's do that instead." And because your brain wants relief now, not results later, you cave. Again and again. This is the procrastination loop. Mainstream psychology confirms it. In a 2013 study by Sirois and Pychyl, researchers found that procrastination isn't just poor time management, it's emotion regulation. People procrastinate to avoid negative feelings. But in doing so, they end up reinforcing the very stress they're trying to escape. So, it's less about time and more about mood repair. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Here's something interesting. Ancient Greek philosophers even talked about this. Aristotle called it akrasia, acting against your better judgment. So, when you put off folding laundry to deep clean your keyboard with a toothpick, congratulations. You've joined an intellectual lineage thousands of years old. Socratic procrastinators, unite. And still, there remains considerable disagreement about whether procrastination is a learned habit, a genetic tendency, or a symptom of something deeper like anxiety or ADHD. Some researchers argue it's evolutionary. Humans needed to delay non-urgent tasks in favor of survival threats. Others think it's mostly cultural, a byproduct of modern overscheduling. The debate's still swirling. But back to you. You don't delay tasks because you're broken. You delay them because your brain is trying to protect you from discomfort, boredom, fear of failure, fear of success, or all of the above. It's like your brain is handing you a mental marshmallow and saying, "Shoo, just one more YouTube video and then we'll feel ready." Spoiler, you won't feel ready. The longer you wait, the worse the task feels. And the worse it feels, the more likely you are to delay. Enter the dopamine feedback loop. Your brain is built to seek rewards. And procrastination offers tiny, instant ones. A funny tweet, a snack, a nap. These activities give you a short burst of dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. But completing the actual task? That's a delayed reward. It doesn't give your brain that same instant payoff. So mindfulness steps in like a kind, slightly sarcastic babysitter and says, "Okay, let's just notice this process." You pause. You acknowledge that you're craving a distraction. You feel the urge instead of acting on it. That tiny moment of noticing? That's the wedge that breaks the loop. You might find this surprising. MRI scans show that long-term meditators have increased gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex. Translation: mindfulness might literally make your executive brain stronger over time. The part of you that says, "Let's just start," gets louder. The part that whines, "Maybe later," starts to quiet down. Of course, you're not meditating in an MRI tube every morning. You're just sitting there, coffee cooling, staring at a blinking cursor. But even in that moment, you can pause. You can name what's happening. "I feel overwhelmed." You can breathe into it. You can notice the urge to escape. And then, just maybe, you can start. One breath doesn't finish a task. But one breath anchors you in a moment where action is possible. You don't have to finish the whole report, just open the document. You don't have to clean the whole kitchen, just fill one glass with water and wipe the counter. Mindfulness breaks tasks down into something your brain can handle, now. An odd but true fact, there's a productivity technique called the 2-minute rule, where if a task takes less than 2 minutes, you do it immediately. People who pair that with mindful breathwork report that they procrastinate less because the breath resets their nervous system before decision-making. Your breath isn't just air. It's data. Now, let's be honest. Your brain's still going to protest. Especially when the task is vague or emotionally loaded. That's normal. But mindfulness doesn't tell you to bulldoze your feelings. It teaches you to stay in the room with them. Like watching a toddler throw a tantrum, except the toddler is your own mind, and the meltdown is over writing a cover letter. You sit. You feel. You act, not because you feel ready, but because you feel grounded. Mindfulness doesn't erase your stress. It just creates enough space between stimulus and response for choice to enter. Think of your attention like a flashlight. Procrastination flicks it all over the room. Mindfulness slowly aims it back to the task, then back again, and again. It's not always graceful. Sometimes it's a strobe light of chaos. But over time, the light steadies. And so do you. So the next time your brain says, "Let's just check one more thing," you might smile, breathe, and say, "Ah." That's the urge to delay. You name it. You feel it. And then, maybe, you do the thing anyway. That clarity, that pause, that breath, that's your inroad. Because when you understand your brain's game, you stop taking the bait. And that understanding brings us to the present moment, where the real work begins. Now that you're starting to see the internal tug-of-war behind procrastination, something else quietly rises to the surface, the moment itself. This moment, right here, where you're listening, breathing, not doing 5 things at once. It's strange how powerful the present can feel when you're actually in it. Which is the entire point of this next layer, the present moment as a power tool. You probably don't think of being present as a productivity technique. It sounds more like something on a wellness retreat brochure, probably next to a picture of someone doing yoga on a cliff. But here's the real kicker: being in the present moment is one of the most underrated, quietly radical things you can do to break procrastination. Because procrastination lives almost entirely in the future. And mindfulness plants you squarely in the now. Let's be clear, when you're procrastinating, you're not avoiding the task itself. You're avoiding how you think the task will feel. The stress. The discomfort. The boredom. And all of that is rooted in a mental future that doesn't actually exist yet. It's just thought, layered on thought, wrapped in anxiety. So when you redirect your attention to this moment, the way your breath feels at the tip of your nose, the soft hum of your surroundings, the texture of the chair beneath you, you cut through the mental fog. You bring your awareness out of the imaginary future and into the real present, where action lives. Mainstream psychology supports this. A study in psychological science found that people trained in present moment awareness experienced fewer intrusive thoughts and were more task-focused over time. The researchers suggested that being present allowed participants to observe distractions without getting stuck in them, like watching cars pass instead of jumping into traffic. You might find this surprising. In some Zen monasteries, novice monks are assigned the job of cleaning toilets as a mindfulness practice. Not because it builds character, but because it demands attention. They're taught to feel the sponge, notice the temperature of the water, and be with each motion. That same kind of attention, though thankfully not in a monastery bathroom, is what you're bringing to your own mind when you stop and notice, even for 10 seconds. Of course, there remains considerable disagreement about how to define the present moment. Some philosophers argue it's fleeting, only existing in a microsecond before becoming memory. Others say it's a state of consciousness that stretches and expands with awareness. Either way, it's not the definition that matters. It's what the moment does for you. Because when you're present, the pressure eases. The idea that everything must be done right now fades. You stop sprinting towards some vague goalpost and start meeting each moment with openness. It's like zooming in on a pixel instead of being overwhelmed by the whole picture. So what does this look like in real life? Picture this, you're avoiding that phone call. Again. You've convinced yourself it's going to be awkward, you won't have the right words, maybe you'll be judged. But you pause. You take one deep breath. You feel your feet on the floor. You notice the tightness in your chest and label it, anxiety. You stay with that sensation instead of pushing it away. And just like that, the dread softens by about 2%. That's all you need sometimes, 2% less fear. Enough to make the call. Or write the first sentence. Or open the app. That small shift is massive. And here's an odd but true fact, in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, there's an exercise called the raisin meditation. Participants spend 5 full minutes observing a single raisin, its texture, weight, smell, even the sound it makes when rolled between the fingers. It's not about the raisin, thankfully. It's about training the brain to slow down and see. To feel. To arrive in the moment. Yes, even with a shriveled grape. So if a raisin can become a portal to presence, imagine what your inbox or planner might become with the right kind of attention. Mindfulness doesn't demand that you be a serene monk floating through your tasks with effortless grace. It just asks that you notice when you're not present, and gently bring yourself back. Again and again. That moment of return? That's the magic. Not the staying. The returning. The present moment also helps because it removes judgment. When you're future-focused, you're likely telling yourself things like, I'll never finish, or, why didn't I do this sooner? But in the present, those thoughts dissolve. There's no past to regret. No future to fear. There's just this breath. This movement. This word you're typing. Another quirky detail, researchers have observed that athletes in flow states, those hyper-present, in the zone moments, report losing their sense of time. They're not thinking about winning or losing. They're just there, fully immersed. That's the same immersion you can build through mindfulness, even if your arena is just answering emails without hating life. Of course, it's not always comfortable. Being present means you have to feel what's there, and sometimes, that's resistance or boredom or shame. But avoiding those feelings hasn't been working for you, has it? Being with them, on the other hand, lets them pass like clouds. No chasing, no clinging. Just noticing. So how do you start practicing this? You don't need incense or chants. Just set a timer for 2 minutes. Sit. Breathe. Feel your body. Watch your thoughts float by. No pressure to stop them. Just awareness. You're not meditating wrong if your mind wanders. You're human. Every gentle return to the moment is a mini protest against procrastination. And that return begins to rewire you. Over time, being present doesn't feel like effort, it feels like relief. You start to want that calm, that clarity. And from that place, taking action feels less like dragging yourself and more like stepping forward. So as your day unfolds, start asking yourself, where is my mind right now? Not to judge. Just to check in. Because the more often you find your way back, the more powerful that present moment becomes. And that newfound power? It's what nudges you gently forward, and into the next layer of this journey. Motivation. That tricky little word you keep waiting on like it's an Uber that never shows up. How many times have you whispered to yourself, I'll do it when I feel ready, or I just need to get motivated, while doing a truly Olympic-level scroll through your feed? Be honest. We've all played that game. But here's the truth, waiting for motivation is like standing in a field, hoping lightning strikes your to-do list into submission. Spoiler, it won't. And that's exactly why the idea of just needing motivation is one of the biggest myths when it comes to procrastination. You probably won't know this, but the neuroscience of motivation tells us it's more of an effect than a cause. Meaning? Motivation shows up after you start something, not before. It's the reward your brain gives you for engaging with a task, not the magical juice that gets you going in the first place. So if motivation is a mirage, how do you move forward without it? Mindfulness offers a pretty elegant answer. You stop waiting and start noticing. You reframe action not as something that requires inspiration, but as something that can arise from attention. You shift from, do I feel like doing this, to, what is this moment asking of me? Let's get practical. Say you're avoiding writing a paper. It's been 3 days, and somehow you've managed to reorganize your spice rack and alphabetize your browser bookmarks. In that moment, instead of waiting to feel the urge to write, you pause. You breathe. You place your attention on your resistance and simply say, this is what procrastination feels like. Noticing it doesn't make it vanish, but it makes it manageable. Mainstream psychology backs this up. A study published in the Journal of Behavioral Therapy and Experimental Psychiatry found that students who practiced brief mindfulness techniques before working on academic assignments reported significantly higher task engagement, even when they still didn't feel like it. Awareness, not willpower, was the game changer. Just a quirky detail, there's a Japanese philosophy called Kaizen, which means continuous improvement through small steps. Businesses use it, but it started as a personal discipline, doing just 1 minute of something a day. 1 minute of mindful typing. 1 mindful spoon washed. You trick your brain into starting by lowering the stakes to something laughably doable. Because here's what your brain doesn't like, ambiguity. Work on project is vague. Open document and read last paragraph is specific. Mindfulness helps you notice the moment when your task is too fuzzy and gently nudge it into clarity. That's where movement begins. And once you're in motion, motivation sneaks in like a cat through an open window. There remains considerable disagreement about whether motivation is truly intrinsic or extrinsic. Do you act because of internal drive, or because of external rewards? But mindfulness shifts the spotlight entirely. Instead of asking why you're doing something, it focuses on how you're engaging with it. You're not pushing yourself. You're joining yourself where you are. Here's something interesting. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter often associated with motivation, is actually more about anticipation than reward. That's why people with ADHD often struggle with procrastination. Their dopamine circuits are less responsive to distant or abstract rewards. Mindfulness, with its emphasis on immediacy, helps tether action to something concrete, the now. Let's go back to you for a second. You're sitting at your desk. You know what you should be doing, but you feel a dense fog behind your eyes. You don't want to force it. That's fair. But you also don't want to delay it again. Here's the move: set a timer for 5 minutes. Breathe. Gently open the work. Just look at it. You're not doing the whole thing. You're simply arriving. And when your mind says, "This isn't productive enough," you thank it, smile, and return to your breath. Because you know now, productivity doesn't start with pressure. It starts with presence. Odd but true fact: in behavioral psychology, there's something called the Zeigarnik effect. It says that your brain remembers unfinished tasks better than completed ones. That's why they haunt you. But starting a task, even for just a few minutes, creates enough cognitive tension that your brain wants to return and finish it. Mindfulness helps you get to that first start line without shame. This is why routines matter. Not elaborate color-coded planners, necessarily. But little rituals that signal to your brain, "We're beginning now." Lighting a candle. Putting on headphones. Opening a specific tab. Breathing for 10 seconds. These tiny anchors calm your nervous system and override the need to feel inspired. Because newsflash, inspiration is flaky. Mindfulness shows up every time you do. You'll still have moments where resistance hits like a wall of pudding. That's okay. The goal isn't to bulldoze through it. It's to sit beside it like an old friend. Hey there, resistance. I see you. You don't scare me today. You breathe. You move. Maybe slowly. Maybe with trembling hands. But you begin. And in that beginning, you stop being a hostage to motivation. You become something far more powerful, a person who acts from awareness. So next time you hear yourself say, "I'll do it when I'm in the mood," smile gently. And maybe whisper back, "Actually, I'll do it when I breathe and begin." That moment, the one where you move despite the lack of sparkle, that's the heart of transformation. Not dramatic. Not viral. Just quietly revolutionary. And that shift in inner posture opens the door to something your body already knows. You're sitting at your desk again, and the clock ticks like it's judging you. Your neck's stiff. Your foot's tapping. There's a tension deep in your shoulders, like you've been holding your breath for days. You haven't even started your task yet, but your body's already panicking as if it's in the final round of a high-stakes game show. This is where mindfulness introduces you to a secret passage out of panic: body awareness. You see, procrastination isn't just something that happens in your mind. It shows up in your body first. Way before you even realize you're avoiding the task, your nervous system's already flaring the warning lights. Your breathing shifts. Your posture caves in. Your stomach tightens. Your jaw might even be clenched right now. Check. Gently unclench. There you go. Body awareness, or interoception, is the ability to notice what's happening inside you, your heartbeat, your breath, your muscle tension. And it turns out that tuning into those signals mindfully can be one of your strongest tools in overcoming procrastination. Mainstream psychology backs this up. A 2018 study published in Cognitive Therapy and Research found that individuals who were more attuned to their bodily sensations, especially those who practiced mindfulness, were significantly less likely to engage in avoidant behaviors. Simply noticing how your body reacts to a task gave people enough space to respond rather than escape. Let's make it real. You're avoiding a deadline. But instead of spiraling into guilt, you pause. You scan your body. You realize your chest is tight, your throat's dry, and your hands feel weirdly hot. That's not being lazy. That's your nervous system flagging something. Maybe fear. Maybe pressure. Whatever it is, now you see it, and because you see it, you can soothe it. You might find this surprising. Some therapists now use body-focused mindfulness techniques like felt sense focusing to help clients get unstuck. The idea is that your body knows more than your conscious mind does. When you sit with a bodily feeling long enough, like a knot in your stomach, it starts to soften, speak, or even guide you. That tightening might say, "I'm afraid this won't be good enough," or "I don't know where to start." and naming that gives you a starting point. An odd but true fact: studies have shown that simply placing your hand over your heart during stress activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode. That gentle pressure signals safety to your brain. It's a surprisingly effective, free, and oddly comforting way to calm yourself down before tackling something daunting. Of course, a long-standing controversy surrounds how much awareness is too much. Some critics argue that focusing too much on bodily sensations can heighten anxiety in people who are already hypervigilant. Others claim that cultivating interoception is the missing piece in most self-help advice. The key, as always, is gentle attention, not obsession. So how do you use body awareness to beat back the tidal wave of panic and paralysis? You start small. The next time you feel the urge to delay something, don't analyze. Just check in. Where is tension living in your body? Is your breath shallow? Are your shoulders creeping up toward your ears like stressed out turtles? Don't judge it. Just observe. Breathe into that space. Ask, what does this part of me need right now? Maybe it's reassurance. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe it just wants to move. Which is why mindful movement, walking slowly, stretching, even standing up for 60 seconds, can be so helpful. You're not distracting yourself. You're regulating your system so you can come back to the task with more presence and less panic. Here's a quirky little exercise. Try box breathing. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold again for 4. Repeat 4 times. It's used by Navy SEALs and anxious overachievers alike. Why? Because it resets your nervous system in under a minute. Your brain might still grumble, but your body will stop screaming. Let's take it deeper. Sometimes, what you're procrastinating isn't the task. It's the emotion attached to it. You're not avoiding the spreadsheet, you're avoiding feeling incompetent. You're not skipping the phone call, you're dodging potential rejection. And where do those emotions live first? Your body. So instead of fighting the emotion or pretending it's not there, mindfulness invites you to sit beside it. To breathe with it. To listen to it like you would a friend who's having a rough day. Because the feeling, like all things, passes, especially when you stop shoving it into the mental broom closet. There's even research suggesting that increasing body awareness helps people with chronic procrastination tendencies build stronger action habits over time. Because when you start to recognize the physical signs of avoidance early, tight jaw, slouching, weirdly intense need to snack, you can intervene sooner. That gap between sensation and action? That's where your power lives. Of course, your brain will try to distract you. This is silly, it might say. You have real work to do. But mindfulness gently answers, this is the real work. Because calming your body is preparing your mind. You don't need to wait for a magical shift in mood. You need to create the conditions where action becomes possible. Just another quirky example, some people keep a body barometer, sticky note on their monitor. A quick checklist: am I breathing deeply? Are my shoulders soft? Is my jaw unclenched? It's not about being perfect, it's about staying tuned in. Because you can't navigate the storm if you're ignoring the thunder. So tonight, as you wind down, practice scanning your body. Start from the crown of your head, and gently move your attention downward. Forehead, eyes, jaw, neck, shoulders, arms, chest, belly, hips, legs, feet. Just observe. Don't change anything. Just notice. And when you return to your task tomorrow, remember this: your body isn't the enemy of your productivity. It's the compass. The early warning system. The quiet guide. If you listen to it, it'll often tell you exactly what you need. And with that grounded awareness, you'll begin to sense the next quiet truth waiting around the corner, that even the smallest choices you make each day carry far more weight than you think. You're standing at the edge of your task, again. Maybe it's replying to that one email. Maybe it's starting a project you've been researching for weeks, which really just means you've opened the tab 37 times and promptly closed it again. And yet, this moment feels just like yesterday's, stalled. But here's the twist most people miss. What actually keeps procrastination alive isn't the big decisions. It's the small ones. The micro decisions. Those tiny, almost imperceptible choices you make every minute. Click or close. Breathe or brace. Begin or delay. And this is where mindfulness sneaks in with its favorite superpower, helping you notice those micro moments. Because if procrastination is death by 1,000 cuts, mindfulness is the balm that finds each one and says, here's a choice point. You probably don't realize how often you're deciding without realizing it. Every time you hover over the task and then pivot to YouTube, just for 5 minutes, a choice was made. Every time you think, I'll get coffee first, or let me check the news one more time, that's another decision. These aren't failures, they're just unexamined moments. And the good news? They're also your access points for change. Let's look at the research. A study from the Journal of Applied Psychology found that people who practiced mindful awareness during workday transitions, those little in-between moments, were significantly more productive over time. Simply pausing between tasks and asking, what's the next right thing, helped participants stay on track with less emotional drain. Now here's something interesting. In behavioral economics, there's a term called choice architecture. It's the idea that the way choices are presented influences the decision you make. Your brain takes the path of least resistance. So if your Slack tab is open and your phone is within reach, guess what path you're about to slide down? Mindfulness steps in and rebuilds that architecture from the inside. Instead of relying on environment alone, it puts the flashlight of awareness right on those fork-in-the-road moments. You become the designer of your own behavior, one decision at a time. You might find this surprising. Many elite athletes use this same skill without calling it mindfulness. They practice mental resets during games, mini check-ins to notice tension, refocus, and decide the next micro-action. Your procrastination may not be happening on a tennis court, but it's still a high-stakes game in your mind. Every "do I keep scrolling or not" is a serve. And still, there remains considerable disagreement about whether decision fatigue causes procrastination or is just a byproduct. Some researchers argue that making too many micro-decisions wears out your willpower, while others say it's emotional resistance masquerading as fatigue. Either way, mindfulness doesn't solve the debate, but it gives you a front-row seat to your own patterns. Let's zoom in. You're sitting with a blank screen. You feel a slight itch, literal or figurative. Your brain mumbles, just check your messages. That's the moment. That tiny hinge. You pause. You take one breath. You label the urge, distraction. And then, here's the key, you decide. Do you act on it, or do you stay? That moment is so small, it's almost invisible. But it's where change lives. An odd but true fact, the average person makes over 35,000 decisions per day. Most are automatic. But what if even 1% of those became conscious? That's 350 chances to shift, gently, toward the version of yourself you keep hoping will show up. So here's a practice. Next time you catch yourself about to click away from your task, ask 3 questions. What am I feeling right now? What am I avoiding? What's the next smallest step I could take? You're not shaming yourself. You're investigating. Like a curious scientist observing a rare behavioral pattern, except the rare pattern is you, trying to avoid making a dentist appointment for the 12th day in a row. Mindfulness also trains you to notice when you're making a choice from fear or from intention. Fear-based decisions often come with tightness, hurried scrolling, breath holding, vague guilt. Intentional ones feel grounded. Even if they're small, like typing one sentence or organizing your workspace, they carry a different energy. Just a quirky note, Buddhist monks often perform simple tasks, like washing rice or folding robes, with complete attention. They treat each movement as a full moment, not a means to an end. You don't need a monastery. You just need to stop thinking of micro-actions as insignificant. Because they're not. They're momentum. Let's not pretend this is always easy. Sometimes you'll notice a micro-decision and still pick the path of avoidance. That's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. Even seeing the decision after the fact still strengthens your awareness. It's like rewinding a security camera and learning your own patterns. That's what mindfulness gives you. Not instant discipline, but a deeper knowing of what's really going on. And from that knowing, you start to interrupt the autopilot loop. You begin to pause. Pivot. Act, not from habit, but from clarity. So the next time you find yourself mid-scroll, halfway through avoiding something important, smile gently. You just caught a micro-choice. That's the work. That's the doorway. And what's on the other side? Not a perfect routine. Not some productivity fantasy version of yourself. Just the next tiny, human-sized action. Which is always enough. And as you learn to notice those moments more often, something else starts to shift. You stop being ruled by that voice in your head, the one that tells you you're lazy, broken, or not enough. You start meeting it with awareness instead of argument. That brings us to the next part of this journey, where that inner critic finally gets a name and a seat at the table, without letting it run the show. Ah yes, the inner critic. That charming internal roommate who seems to have a PhD in your every perceived failure. It wakes up with you, walks into every task with you, and has opinions about everything you haven't done yet. You know the voice. Why didn't you start this earlier? You're so behind. Other people don't struggle like this. If you're waiting for that voice to go away so you can finally get stuff done in peace, well, bad news. It's probably not going anywhere. But here's the better news: mindfulness doesn't tell you to fight that voice. It teaches you to relate to it differently. You don't have to banish your inner critic. You just have to stop giving it the keys to the front seat. Think of your inner critic like a talkative roommate. It means well, sort of, but it has terrible timing and zero social awareness. You don't have to believe everything it says. You just have to notice it talking, maybe roll your eyes a little, and get on with your day. Psychologically, this is known as cognitive diffusion, a technique from acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, that helps you separate you from your thoughts. Instead of, I'm a failure, you start to hear it as, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. That tiny shift creates distance. And that distance creates space to breathe, to act, to move forward. A 2014 study in behavior therapy found that cognitive diffusion practices, especially when paired with mindfulness, significantly reduced avoidance behavior and improved task initiation. Basically, when people learned to see their thoughts as passing clouds rather than absolute truths, they procrastinated less and engaged more. Here's something interesting: Buddhist psychology doesn't actually distinguish between positive and negative thoughts. All thoughts are seen as phenomena, passing weather. The goal isn't to have better thoughts, but to observe all of them with equanimity. That's your task too. Your inner critic can say what it wants. You don't have to argue. Just notice it, and choose your next step anyway. An odd but true fact: some therapists encourage clients to name their inner critic. Not metaphorically, literally. Like Debbie the Doomcaster, or Gary the Guilt Machine. Why? Because naming creates separation. It's easier to say, that's just Gary being dramatic, than to internalize every harsh word as truth. Your critic might be loud, but you don't have to take direction from it. Of course, there remains considerable disagreement about whether the inner critic serves a necessary function. Some researchers argue it helps motivate and protect us by preventing mistakes. Others say it's just leftover mental debris from early life conditioning. Either way, mindfulness shifts the question entirely. It asks, what's your relationship with that voice? And right now, that relationship is probably a little codependent. Let's walk through a moment. You sit down to write. The voice shows up: this is going to be garbage. You pause. You breathe. Instead of believing it, you say, there's the critic again. You gently place that thought on a metaphorical leaf and watch it float down a stream. You're not arguing. You're observing. You're not reacting. You're returning. Here's a simple practice. The next time your inner critic flares up, say this silently: "Thank you, mind." Not sarcastically. Genuinely. Thank it for trying to protect you from shame or failure or whatever ancient fear it's trying to solve. And then take a single action anyway. Open the tab. Write the first sentence. Call the dentist. Not despite the voice, but alongside it. Just a quirky detail. Some meditation teachers suggest actually inviting your inner critic into your practice. "Come sit next to me," they say in their mind. "You can talk, but I'll be here breathing." It's a radical kind of inclusion. Not resistance, not rejection, just presence. And when you practice this over time, something wild happens. The critic gets bored. When you stop reacting, it stops escalating. Like a kid throwing a tantrum who realizes no one's paying attention. It still mutters in the background, but it loses its power to derail you. Let's be honest, though, some days, the critic is relentless. It doesn't just whisper about your productivity. It brings in every failure, every comparison, every should you've collected since the 6th grade. Those days, mindfulness isn't a cure, it's a companion. You sit beside the noise, you breathe into the discomfort, and you take the tiniest action you can manage. Because that voice might always be with you, but it doesn't get to dictate the shape of your day. Here's a practical tool: noting. When a judgmental thought pops up, you label it softly in your mind. Judging. Or worrying. Or planning. You don't analyze it. You just name it and return to your breath. Over time, this practice trains your brain to create space between hearing the thought and believing the thought. Another weird truth: your inner critic often flares up more when you're on the edge of growth. Right before you start something meaningful or challenging, the voice gets loud. Why? Because new things feel risky. Risk makes the brain nervous. And that voice? It's just your brain's awkward attempt to keep you safe in the familiar. Kind of like how a dog barks at a vacuum cleaner. It doesn't mean it's right, it's just reacting. So next time the voice says, "You'll fail," you might smile and whisper, "Ah, you again. Must mean I'm about to do something that matters." And then, just like that, you get back to it. Not with force. Not with fake confidence. But with gentle awareness that says, "I hear the noise. And I choose to act anyway." That's the muscle you're building. Not silence, but sovereignty. You may not control your thoughts. But you control your focus. Your actions. Your return. And with that steady return, something deeper starts to shift. Not just in your mind, but in how you experience time itself. Because when the critic loses its grip, and your awareness expands, suddenly, you start to notice that time feels different. That, dear friend, leads us into the next revelation: how mindfulness reshapes your entire perception of time. Time. That slippery, shape-shifting thing that always seems to speed up when you're behind and crawl when you're waiting for something. Some days it feels like you're drowning in it. Other days, like there's never enough. But here's the twist you might not see coming: time isn't the villain in your procrastination story. Your perception of it is. And that's where mindfulness slips in, not to give you more time, but to change how time feels. You've felt it before. That distorted sense of urgency that floods your body when a deadline looms. You check the clock, your pulse quickens, and suddenly you're frozen, staring at a blinking cursor, convinced there's no point even starting because you're already too late. Ironically, you then spend the next 40 minutes scrolling, because why not panic and waste time? This is what psychologists call temporal distortion, your brain's tendency to perceive time inaccurately, especially under stress. When you're anxious, time feels compressed. When you're bored, it stretches. And when you're avoiding something, it just kind of disappears. Mindfulness breaks that loop by returning you to the now, where time has texture again. Instead of being stuck in the illusion of not enough, you're suddenly inhabiting seconds, not spiraling through hours. Mainstream psychology gives this approach some love. A study from the Journal of Time Perception, yes, that's a real thing, found that participants who practiced mindfulness meditation were significantly more accurate in estimating time intervals than those who didn't. The more mindful they became, the more grounded their experience of time was. Translation: mindfulness helps anchor your inner clock. Here's something interesting. In certain indigenous cultures, time is not linear, it's circular, event-based, or even fluid. You don't do things at 10 a.m. You do them when the sun is here or after we've eaten. These frameworks prioritize presence over precision. While we don't all live in sun-based communities, mindfulness lets you experience a taste of that fluid, grounded awareness. There remains considerable disagreement among cognitive scientists about whether time is something we perceive objectively or something the brain actively constructs. Some argue that our sense of time is just a mental model based on memory and prediction. Others think there may be a deeper, felt sense of time flowing through consciousness itself. Regardless, when you're mindful, your experience of time becomes intentional rather than reactive. Let's bring it back to you. You're staring down your afternoon to-do list. It's long, annoying, and emotionally loaded. You feel pressure building. That sinking dread? That's your brain time traveling to a future where you've already failed. But instead of riding that anxiety wave, you pause. You breathe. You check in. Where am I right now? Suddenly, you're back in the room. There's a laptop. A chair. A task. A moment. One moment. Not all of them at once. Odd but true fact, Tibetan monks use a practice called maranasati, or death contemplation, to keep time perception sharp. They meditate on impermanence, not in a morbid way, but as a reminder that time is precious because it is limited. Strangely, this makes them more present, not less. You don't have to go that far, but the principle stands. Presence slows the internal rush. Here's a micro-practice you can use, the 5-5-5 time grounding. Look around and name 5 things you can see. 5 things you can hear. 5 things you can feel, physically, like the air on your skin or the chair beneath you. It pulls you out of the abstract fog and back into now. Suddenly, you're not in tomorrow's panic or last week's regret. You're just here. And from here, doing the next thing feels possible. Let's not ignore the digital piece of this. Apps, notifications, constant pings, they fragment your perception of time. Ever spent a few minutes checking social media, only to emerge from the time warp 45 minutes later, dazed and craving snacks? Yeah, that wasn't a moral failure. That was your attention being yanked through a black hole. Mindfulness helps you recognize the difference between time passing and you passing through time. There's a subtle but profound shift when you go from, I'm out of time, to, I'm aware of this moment. The former makes you freeze. The latter invites you to act. Just a quirky tip, try setting a visual timer. Something like an hourglass or a color-blocked countdown app. Not to pressure you, but to gently shape your awareness of time. Watching time move physically creates a sense of flow, not urgency. You'll also notice something else. When you practice mindfulness, time starts to feel roomier. Less like a hallway you're sprinting through and more like a meadow you can walk across. You stop saying, I don't have time, and start asking, what can I do with the time I have? And when you're in that space, even 5 focused minutes feels longer, fuller, richer. Here's a moment to try tomorrow. Block out 15 minutes to do something you've been avoiding. Before you begin, sit quietly for 1 full minute. Breathe. Notice the sounds around you. Feel your hands. Then begin, not with dread, but with deliberate, present action. When the time ends, check in. Did that feel faster or slower than usual? Odds are, you'll feel like you used time, rather than being used by it. So next time you say, there's not enough time, pause. Ask, is it time I lack, or presence? Because once you start living from this moment instead of racing toward the next one, procrastination loses its favorite excuse. And just like that, the real reward of mindfulness starts to show itself. Not more time, but more choice about how you spend it. Which brings us into the next layer, where the chemistry of your motivation gets real, and your brain's favorite feel-good molecule steps onto the stage. Let's talk about your brain's favorite chemical party guest, dopamine. You know, the feel-good molecule that gets blamed for everything from phone addiction to your inability to start writing that report. But here's what most people miss: dopamine isn't the enemy. In fact, it's the engine that drives every maybe later in your life. Understanding how it works, and how mindfulness changes your relationship with it, is a massive step in rewiring your procrastination patterns. First, let's bust a myth: dopamine isn't pleasure. It's anticipation. It's the brain whispering, "This is going to be great," even if what it's flagging is a cinnamon roll, a notification ping, or 3 hours of YouTube commentary on a TV show you've never watched. Dopamine gets you to pursue something. It makes tasks feel worth chasing. And here's the kicker: procrastination hijacks this system by making the easier tasks seem more instantly rewarding. So your brain, in all its evolutionary brilliance, starts nudging you. Why suffer through this spreadsheet, it says, when you could watch a penguin dance to Uptown Funk? And you listen, not because you're weak, but because your brain loves immediate gratification. It's like a toddler in a candy store with a credit card. Mainstream neuroscience confirms this. A study in Nature Neuroscience revealed that the dopaminergic system, the part of the brain that processes reward, is more active when a person anticipates a reward than when they actually receive it. This is why starting a task feels harder than finishing one. The excitement isn't there yet. Your brain hasn't had a chance to release the chemical it needs to want the work. That's where mindfulness comes in. It changes your relationship with dopamine by teaching your brain to find reward in the process, not just the payoff. You stop waiting for the big win and start tuning into small moments of satisfaction: the click of a key, the completion of a sentence, the breath between thoughts. You might find this surprising. In a mindfulness-based intervention with college students, researchers discovered that participants who practiced daily mindful awareness reported increased intrinsic motivation and decreased procrastination. The reason? They started to enjoy the act of doing, not just finishing. Dopamine didn't disappear, it got redirected. Just a quirky detail: some monks report feeling deep satisfaction while sweeping a floor or washing a dish. Why? Because mindfulness makes even the simplest actions feel meaningful. They're not chasing a gold star. They're present, and presence is rewarding in its own way. Yes, even if it involves a sponge. Now, of course, there remains considerable disagreement about how much we can actually train our dopamine systems. Some neuroscientists argue that dopamine sensitivity is mostly genetic. Others believe it can be rewired through consistent behavioral shifts. The debate continues, but the lived experience of mindfulness practitioners tells a compelling story. When you stop chasing constant reward, your brain starts noticing the small ones. Let's apply this to your life. Imagine you're trying to work on something important. The dopamine trap is real. You keep pausing to check messages, snack, or open tabs, just to look. Your brain is saying, "Where's the fun in this?" So instead of yelling at yourself or forcing motivation, try this: pause. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath. Ask, can I find one satisfying thing in the next minute of this task? Maybe it's highlighting a sentence. Maybe it's formatting a line. Maybe it's organizing the file names. Small wins. Microdoses of progress. You start creating your own dopamine hits, internally. No likes. No dings. Just the quiet satisfaction of doing. This is how habits start to shift. Not by forcing yourself to love every task, but by finding tiny moments of reward inside the doing. Over time, your brain starts looking forward to those, too. Odd but true fact, there's a Japanese productivity method called Pomodoro, 25-minute work sprints followed by 5-minute breaks. People who pair this with mindfulness, like breathing deeply during breaks or walking without their phones, report more motivation and less burnout. Why? Because they're teaching their brains to associate effort with balance, not just struggle. So what can you do right now? Try a mindful start. Before you begin a task, take 1 full minute to breathe. Not with the goal of calming down, but just to arrive. Let that first breath be your brain's new signal. Something good is about to begin. Then, while working, look for what's working. Did you spell something right? Nice. Did you finally organize that folder? Celebrate. These are the dopamine moments you've been ignoring. Your brain just needs help noticing them. Mindfulness is like a dopamine whisperer. It doesn't silence the system, it teaches it to pay attention to real satisfaction. The kind that's slow, quiet, deep. You'll still get distracted. You'll still want the quicker high. That's normal. But now, you'll catch it. You'll say, my brain is looking for a treat. And then you can decide, do I want to chase the treat, or create one? Let's not pretend this turns you into some perfect productivity monk. You'll still have moments when you forget everything and spiral into snack and scroll mode. But mindfulness gives you a way back. You'll start again. You'll breathe. And you'll find reward in the beginning, not just the end. Because the more your brain learns to enjoy the act of doing, especially in small, doable doses, the less it needs external bribes to get going. And the more it learns to sit with discomfort, boredom, or tension, the less those states derail you. So the next time you're about to click away from your task in search of a dopamine boost, pause and ask, can I find a drop of satisfaction here? And with that shift, you begin to transform procrastination from a loop of chasing highs into a path of finding joy in showing up. And now that you're building that trust with yourself, moment by moment, we can take it deeper, into the raw experience of resistance itself. Not as a character flaw, but as a sensation you can touch, examine, and eventually, move through. Resistance. You know the feeling. That invisible force that makes even the easiest task feel like trying to lift a car with a teaspoon. You say, I'll just open the document, and your body reacts like you've suggested a casual jog up Mount Everest. It's not logical. It's not even always emotional. It's a sensation. That's the shift mindfulness invites you to make here, to stop treating resistance as a character flaw and start recognizing it as just another passing bodily state. Not some deep moral failure. Not proof of your laziness. Just a tensing in the body. A heaviness in the limbs. A cloud of fatigue behind the eyes. Resistance isn't you, it's something you're experiencing. Here's where it gets interesting. When you start to meet resistance as sensation rather than narrative, something remarkable happens. It stops being so powerful. You stop wrestling with it and start watching it. It's no longer a wall. It's weather. Mainstream psychology is catching on to this. In a study from the Journal of Contextual Behavioral Science, researchers found that people who practiced acceptance-based strategies for procrastination, focusing on the felt experience of resistance rather than the content of avoidance thoughts, were more likely to take action, even while still feeling resistant. Translation: you can feel resistance and still move. Here's something interesting. In somatic psychology, there's a practice called pendulation. You focus on a difficult sensation, like tension in your chest, then shift your attention to a neutral or pleasant sensation, like your feet on the floor. Back and forth. This gentle toggling helps your nervous system regulate without shutting down. It's mindfulness in motion. There remains considerable disagreement about whether resistance is mostly physiological, nervous system overload, psychological, fear-based, or behavioral, habitual avoidance. Some camps argue it's trauma-related, others say it's just poor task design. But mindfulness doesn't choose sides. It simply asks, what's happening in this moment? Let's walk through that together. You're avoiding a task. You tell yourself it's because you're tired, or the timing's wrong, or Mercury's in retrograde, something. But instead of running the mental excuses, you pause. You close your eyes. You scan your body. Maybe your stomach is tight. Your throat feels thick. Your legs are restless. Whatever it is, that is resistance, showing up in your body. You breathe into it. You say, I feel tightness. You don't say, I'm a failure. You anchor in sensation, not story. You're not trying to fix it. You're letting it be seen. Odd but true fact, in some Japanese Zen lineages, students are encouraged to meditate through physical discomfort, like holding still even when their legs fall asleep. Why? Not to suffer, but to observe the resistance and realize it passes. The practice isn't about endurance, it's about staying with discomfort until it transforms. Here's a quirky practice. Next time you feel resistance rise, describe it out loud like a weather report. Currently experiencing low-pressure procrastination with scattered shame and a chance of coffee cravings. Say it with a smile. It helps you break identification and treat the sensation with lightness instead of judgment. Let's go deeper. What if resistance isn't just something to beat or bypass, but a signal? A message? Sometimes, resistance is your body saying, "This feels unsafe." Not physically unsafe, emotionally. Maybe you're afraid of being judged. Or failing. Or succeeding and raising the stakes for yourself. Resistance often points towards something that matters. So rather than bulldozing it with productivity hacks, mindfulness says, pause. Get curious. Sit beside the resistance and ask, what are you trying to protect me from? Often, the answer isn't very dramatic. It might just be, I'm overwhelmed. And you can work with that. Another quirky detail, some artists describe resistance as the threshold guardian, a signal that you're close to something meaningful. Like a dragon at the gate of a treasure. You're not meant to slay it. You're meant to understand it, bow to it, and keep going. But let's keep it practical. What do you do when resistance feels physical? You move. Mindfully. Shake your hands. Roll your shoulders. Stretch your face like you're in a cartoon. Then, sit again. Sometimes, physical resistance just needs an exit valve. Not a lecture. And when the resistance is emotional, you name it gently. I feel dread. Or, I feel not good enough. You let those feelings have air. And then you return, not because the feeling is gone, but because you've made room for it to coexist with action. Remember, mindfulness doesn't eliminate resistance. It teaches you how to move with it. You're not waiting for a perfect mood. You're not trying to become someone who never hesitates. You're becoming someone who sees the hesitation, and steps forward anyway. One breath. One small action. That's all it takes to loosen resistance's grip. Let's test it together. Pick something you've been avoiding. Now pause. Scan your body. Where do you feel it? Name the sensation. Breathe. Then ask, what's the smallest next step I could take while still feeling this? Maybe it's opening the file. Writing a single word. Googling the first resource. Don't try to escape the feeling. Bring it with you. Make space for it. Let it ride shotgun. Because here's the truth, your resistance doesn't need to vanish for you to make progress. You just need to stop treating it like an emergency. And once you stop fighting the sensation, something else opens. You begin to approach your tasks not as threats, but as invitations. Invitations to engage, to show up, to try, even while carrying the weight of uncertainty. That subtle shift, from avoidance to approach, is where the real momentum begins. So you've sat with the resistance. You've breathed into it, named it, even invited it to tag along while you took one small step forward. And now, something interesting begins to happen. The energy starts to shift. The task that once felt like a threat begins to feel doable. Not exciting, necessarily, but not quite as sharp around the edges. That shift, right there, is what mindfulness is really after. The movement from avoidance to approach. See, when you're in a state of avoidance, everything about the task is wrapped in negative energy. It feels like something to escape, something to fear or resent or endlessly delay. You don't even see the task itself, you only see the dread attached to it. But the moment you approach that task with awareness, something softens. You move from resistance to readiness. Not all at once, but enough to begin. Let's unpack how this works. In mainstream psychology, there's a model known as the approach avoidance conflict. It explains how we're often drawn to a goal and simultaneously repelled by it. You want to finish the assignment, approach, but fear it will be hard or imperfect, avoidance. This tug-of-war creates internal tension that often results in, you guessed it, procrastination. But here's the good news: mindfulness doesn't demand that you resolve that conflict. It just gives you tools to choose your side more often. To recognize the pull of avoidance and still move toward the task, even with the pull still there. You might find this surprising. In studies of mindfulness-based relapse prevention programs for addiction recovery, researchers found that participants were better able to approach cravings with curiosity rather than reacting or avoiding them. That same approach can be applied to procrastination. You're not avoiding the discomfort, you're turning toward it, gently. There remains considerable disagreement in the research world about how motivated someone has to feel to approach a goal effectively. Some argue that motivation must precede action. Others, especially those in mindfulness-based circles, suggest that action itself generates motivation. You start, and your brain catches up. Let's ground it in your everyday life. Picture yourself avoiding a task. You know you should do it, but there's a pit in your stomach. Instead of pushing it away, mindfulness invites you to ask, what if I just turn toward this gently? You don't have to do it yet. You just sit with the thought of doing it. You observe your reaction. Maybe you notice fear, boredom, irritation. You name them. You breathe. And you stay. That staying is the beginning of approach. Just a quirky detail: in animal studies, rats given the choice between approaching a food reward and avoiding a mild shock will often freeze, caught between drive and fear. But when trained to tolerate their discomfort through exposure, they gradually spend more time approaching the reward. It's not about eliminating fear. It's about retraining response. You're not a rat in a maze, obviously, but your nervous system sometimes behaves like one. And mindfulness teaches that you can recondition it, not through force, but through gentle exposure. You begin to associate tasks with presence instead of panic. Curiosity instead of catastrophe. A practical tool here is what's often called the approach breath. Before starting a task, pause. Breathe in slowly and say in your mind, I'm moving toward. Exhale and say, this matters to me. It's cheesy, maybe. But you're not talking to your ego, you're talking to your nervous system. And it listens to tone, repetition, and intention. And what does this actually look like in action? Let's say you've been avoiding scheduling an appointment. Mindfulness doesn't tell you to just do it like some motivational slogan. It says, can you sit with the discomfort of doing this for 1 minute? You breathe. You name the sensation. And then you take one micro step, opening the calendar app, finding the number, starting the email. That's approach. Small. Courageous. Quiet. And as you do it more often, your brain starts to rewire. It stops interpreting tasks as threats. It learns, oh, we can do things even when we feel uncomfortable. That lesson is worth gold. An odd but true fact, the term eustress refers to positive stress, the kind that challenges you just enough to engage without overwhelming you. Mindfulness helps reframe certain tasks from distress to eustress. They stop being panic triggers and start being manageable challenges. And when you approach your tasks like this, you notice something else: your self-talk changes. The voice that once screamed, you'll fail, softens to, this might be hard, but you can try. That's mindfulness whispering in your ear, not because the task is easier, but because you're more present with it. Over time, the space between awareness and action gets shorter. You feel discomfort, but instead of spiraling into a 90-minute TikTok break, you sit with it for a moment, and then you begin. That's the shift. And no, you won't always get it right. You'll still avoid. Still delay. Still occasionally run screaming from your inbox. But you'll recover faster. Reconnect more quickly. Move with more grace. So the next time you feel yourself backing away from a task, try saying, what if I just turn toward this? Not to finish it, but to begin noticing it. That's your moment of approach. That's the pivot point. Because procrastination isn't just about doing or not doing. It's about your orientation to the task. Are you moving away in fear, or turning toward in awareness? And once you've made that pivot, even once, the door to action swings open just a crack. Just enough to get your foot in. And when you're ready to step through that door consistently, the question becomes, how do you anchor this mindful approach in your day-to-day life? Which brings us into the next section, where mindfulness stops being theory and starts becoming a real, tangible ritual you can live with. You've made the shift. You've learned to breathe through the discomfort, to face tasks without waiting for a lightning bolt of motivation, and to turn toward what matters instead of away. But now comes the real test. How do you keep this going? Mindfulness isn't just a tool for emergencies. It's not something you dust off when your inbox hits DEFCON 1. It works best when it's part of the rhythm of your life, something you return to daily, in small, manageable ways. This section is all about building mindfulness rituals that actually stick, especially for those of us who forget we even downloaded that meditation app last summer. First things first, ritual doesn't mean rigid. You don't need to wake up at 5 a.m., light a sandalwood candle, and recite mantras while sitting cross-legged in an aesthetically pleasing corner of your home. Although hey, if that's your vibe, go for it. What you need is a repeatable, realistic, and gentle way to remind yourself, hey, I'm here. I'm present. I'm choosing how I show up. Mainstream research confirms that consistency, not duration, makes the biggest impact. A study in behavior research and therapy showed that even brief mindfulness practices, just 10 minutes a day, led to significant improvements in emotional regulation and attention. The key was regularity, not epic meditation marathons. You might find this surprising. Some of the most effective mindfulness routines for reducing procrastination involve zero formal meditation. It's not about sitting on a cushion. It's about showing up for your life with awareness. That includes brushing your teeth, making coffee, opening your laptop, all of it. Let's walk through some rituals that actually work for real-world, occasionally flaky humans like you, and everyone else. 1. The morning micropause. Before your feet hit the floor, take one deep breath. Just one. Notice how your body feels. Set a one-word intention for your day, something like focus, steady, or kind. That's it. You've already shifted your trajectory. 2. Mindful device unlock. Every time you unlock your phone, take one mindful breath before touching anything. You'll be shocked at how often you go to your phone without any clear reason. This alone can cut hours of unconscious procrastination. 3. The 3-minute anchor. Set a timer once or twice a day. Sit quietly. Breathe. Notice where your thoughts go. No fixing. No judging. Just 3 minutes of attention. If you forget one day, cool. Start again tomorrow. It's not a streak, it's a return. 4. Task beginning ritual. Pick one simple thing you do before starting any focused task. Maybe it's a sip of tea, a deep breath, or opening your document while saying quietly, just the beginning. Ritual creates a mental bridge from resistance to action. And here's something interesting, the brain loves ritual. It's soothing. Predictable. Familiar. That's why we procrastinate in patterns, it feels safe. But when you create new, mindful rituals, you give your brain a fresh pattern to follow. Oh, it learns, when we light this candle or take this breath, it's time to engage. There remains considerable disagreement about the role of discipline versus environment in forming habits. Some experts argue that willpower is the key. Others claim it's all about reducing friction. Mindfulness leans into both. It uses awareness to reduce internal friction, and builds rituals that reduce external ones. Now for a quirky fact, in one experiment, people who wrote down a specific when and where for their habit were 91% more likely to follow through. That's why vague mindfulness goals, I'll meditate more, fail. Instead, say, after I brush my teeth, I'll sit for 1 minute. Boom. Ritual created. Let's be clear, this isn't about building the perfect mindfulness routine. That's another sneaky form of procrastination, over-designing your self-improvement plan instead of actually living it. Your ritual can be messy, imperfect, missed. What matters is that you keep returning. Just like mindfulness itself. It's not the breath you miss, it's the breath you return to. Let's take it a step further. Make a short mindfulness menu for your week. It could include a 10-minute walk without your phone, doing the dishes with full attention, a quiet coffee break where you just sit, journaling for 5 minutes about what you noticed that day. Pick one item a day, or just repeat the same one every day. You don't need variety, you need relationship. These rituals aren't boxes to tick. They're moments to come home to yourself. And when you do this consistently, something subtle changes. You don't just use mindfulness to handle procrastination, you use it to prevent it. You start noticing tension before it becomes paralysis. You feel the urge to scroll before you lose the hour. You remember, earlier, that you actually wanted to write the thing. Odd but true detail, the part of the brain activated by mindfulness practice, especially the anterior cingulate cortex, plays a big role in noticing conflicts. When trained, it lights up earlier. That means you're less likely to be 40 minutes into a YouTube rabbit hole before realizing it. Instead, you catch the decision mid-scroll. So what's your next step? Choose one ritual. Just one. The smallest, gentlest one. Try it for 3 days. Don't track your performance, just notice what changes. How it feels to pause. To return. To move from autopilot to presence. And remember, mindfulness isn't something you master. It's something you practice. And a practice, by definition, means you're allowed to forget, to restart, to try again. That's the ritual too. Over time, these tiny rituals become your scaffolding. You build your day not on adrenaline or urgency, but on quiet moments of choice. And that foundation holds, especially when perfectionism tries to pull you back into the trap of not good enough. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what we're heading into next. Perfectionism, the fancy-looking mask procrastination loves to wear. It shows up with good intentions, speaks in elegant sentences like, "You just want to do your best," or, "It has to be right before you start." But let's not kid ourselves. Perfectionism isn't about high standards. It's about fear. And when fear's in charge, guess what you do? Nothing. You wait, polish, delay, overthink, and eventually, scroll. And if you've been procrastinating in the name of perfection, mindfulness is here with an eye roll, a gentle shrug, and a soft little nudge. Because mindfulness isn't interested in your flawless outcome, it's interested in your compassionate action. Let's start here. Perfectionism isn't really a personality trait. It's a defense mechanism. It's your brain's way of avoiding judgment, either from others or from your harshest critic, you. So you delay starting because it's not quite ready, or you rewrite the same sentence 12 times, or you avoid the task altogether until the last possible second when there's no time to make it perfect, which is oddly a relief. Here's where mindfulness changes the game. It teaches you that done is more peaceful than perfect. And more than that, it helps you stop treating your worth like it depends on the quality of your output. You're allowed to do something badly on the way to doing it well. Revolutionary, right? Mainstream research supports this. A 2020 study in the Journal of Anxiety Disorders found that mindfulness training helped perfectionists reduce self-critical thoughts and increase task initiation. The participants didn't just become calmer, they started more, finished more, and felt better about what they did. You might find this surprising. Perfectionism is often linked to procrastination in a self-reinforcing loop. The higher the standards, the more stress you feel. The more stress, the more you delay. The more you delay, the more pressure builds. Eventually, you're paralyzed, but still somehow feel guilty for not doing your best. Here's something interesting. In Buddhist philosophy, the concept of non-striving is central to mindfulness. You don't meditate to become perfect at meditating. You do it to be with what is, even if what's present is restlessness, doubt, or the endless mental loop about whether you're doing it right. That concept applies to your work, too. You don't approach your task to get a gold star. You approach it to be in relationship with it, to explore it, feel it, experiment with it, learn from it. The outcome? That comes later. Of course, there remains considerable disagreement about whether perfectionism can be cured or just managed. Some researchers say it's deeply ingrained, others believe it's a learned behavior that can be unlearned. But mindfulness sidesteps the debate entirely. It says, let's not fix your perfectionism. Let's notice it and stop giving it the wheel. Let's bring it into your day. You've been avoiding a task because it doesn't feel ready to start. You want the right mood, the right tools, maybe just one more resource to feel confident. Mindfulness invites you to pause. Breathe. Name what's happening. I want this to be perfect. Then ask, can I begin anyway? That question, can I begin anyway, isn't passive. It's courageous. It means you're willing to try something that might not live up to the fantasy in your head. And that, frankly, is the only way anything meaningful ever gets done. Just a quirky fact, the Japanese art of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, highlighting the cracks instead of hiding them. The flaw becomes part of the beauty. You can apply the same mindset to your work. Let it be imperfect. Let it show the process. That's where the authenticity lives. Try this simple practice. The next time you catch yourself trying to get it just right before you start, stop. Take one breath. Say, let this be version 1. And then move. Not because it's perfect. Because it's possible. Over time, this loosens the grip of perfectionism. You stop needing every sentence to shine before moving on. You stop waiting for your full confidence to arrive before taking the first step. You start showing up messy, honest, and kind, with yourself and with your process. Here's an odd but true phenomenon. In creative studies, participants who were told to produce bad art for 10 minutes often ended up feeling more inspired, and produced better work later, than those who were told to produce good art. Why? Because permission to be imperfect lowers the threat level. It opens the door to action. So let's reframe this. What if your task isn't a performance? What if it's an experiment? What if your job isn't to impress, but to explore? That's the shift mindfulness offers. You breathe into the pressure. You notice the part of you that wants to get it right. And you say, you're allowed to be here. But I'm moving anyway. You begin. You stumble. You learn. You adjust. That's how things get built, not with flawless first tries, but with real, messy starts. Let's end this section with a tiny ritual. At the top of your next to-do list, write this. I allow this to be imperfect and done. Look at it when you hesitate. Whisper it when the critic rises. Let it be your permission slip. Because your worth isn't waiting on the other side of a perfect project. It's already here, in your effort, your breath, your brave little start. And now, as you begin to live this more compassionate way of working, the final piece starts to fall into place. How to build a long-term pattern of showing up, day after day, not with punishment, but with presence. You felt it now, what it's like to pause instead of panic, to begin even when the urge to delay is strong, to meet your resistance with breath instead of battle. And that's not a one-time win. That's a pattern in the making. Because ultimately, this journey isn't about fixing you. It's about rewiring you, gently, consistently, mindfully, so that procrastination isn't your default setting anymore. Not because you finally conquered it like a boss-level villain, but because you've learned how to relate to it differently. Day by day. Moment by moment. So let's talk about the long game. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change, isn't just a cool science word. It's the reason mindfulness works. Every time you choose awareness over avoidance, presence over panic, microaction over mental escape, you're laying down new neural pathways. Like carving gentle trails through an overgrown forest. Mainstream psychology is big on this. A 2021 study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that participants who maintained a mindfulness practice for just 8 weeks showed significant improvements in task initiation, emotional resilience, and executive functioning. In other words, their brains got better at starting and sticking with things, not just during the study, but weeks afterward. You might find this surprising. The areas of the brain associated with procrastination, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, changed shape with regular mindfulness practice. The prefrontal cortex thickens, which means better planning and impulse control. The amygdala, the drama queen of fear and overwhelm, shrinks. Less panic, more presence. But here's the important thing: rewiring isn't dramatic. It's not a montage of productivity success with upbeat music. It's choosing, each day, to come back. Even when you forget. Especially when you forget. Because that return, over and over, is the pattern that rewires you. Of course, there remains considerable disagreement about how long it takes to break a habit. You've probably heard 21 days, 66 days, or some other magic number. But mindfulness doesn't deal in absolutes. It deals in now. This moment. This breath. And then the next. Let's bring this into your real, everyday life. Picture a week where you don't feel on fire. You're tired. Unmotivated. Maybe your inner critic is having a loud day. The old you might have spiraled, delayed everything, escaped into snacks and screens. But the rewired you? You pause. You breathe. You ask, what's one kind thing I can do for myself right now that moves me forward, even 1 inch? That's what rewiring looks like. Not perfection. Not constant flow. Just fewer hard crashes. Fewer zero productivity days. More, okay, I did a little, and that counts. Just a quirky practice to seal the deal, the mindful debrief. At the end of your day, take 2 minutes. Ask. What did I notice today? When did I feel resistance? What helped me return to presence? What's one thing I can try again tomorrow? That's your pattern loop. Observation. Compassion. Adjustment. Repeat. Odd but true, experienced meditators still report wandering thoughts, resistance, even full days of forgetting their practice. But they don't quit. They return. That's the secret. Rewiring isn't about getting it right, it's about coming back without shame. Let's be honest. You'll still procrastinate sometimes. But now? You'll see it. You'll name it. You'll breathe into it. And you'll move, not perfectly, but mindfully. That is the rewiring. That is the long game. You've already started. And every time you return, your neural pathways whisper, "Ah. This again." We remember. And they strengthen. So take one last breath with me here. Feel your body. Your weight in the chair. The gentle rhythm of your breath. You've done something powerful, not by pushing, but by pausing. And this pause is something you can carry forward into every day that follows. Even when life gets messy. Even when you forget for a while. Because now, you know how to begin again. And again. And now, let's slow it all the way down. You're here now, resting in the quiet after the turning. Let the words fade to a soft echo, and notice the gentleness of your breath. In and out. That same rhythm that's been with you since the beginning of this journey. Your body, heavier now, starts to soften. The shoulders release their grip. The jaw loosens. The space behind your eyes grows wider, quieter, like a dim room where you can finally let go. You've traveled far, through loops of resistance, sparks of clarity, and the soft, quiet strength of showing up again and again. The edges of procrastination are no longer as sharp. They're just part of the landscape now. A signal. A whisper. Something you can listen to, without letting it steer the ship. And now you know, you don't need perfect conditions. You don't need a burst of brilliance. You just need to arrive. With a breath. with a glance inward, with a willingness to do the next small thing. So let yourself ease into sleep, or stillness, or whatever rest feels right. Let your thoughts wander softly, without anchors. There's no need to hold on. Not now. You've practiced enough. You've begun the rewiring. And that's more than enough for tonight. Let your breath be your lullaby. Let your body be your home. And let the present moment be the quiet, steady light that welcomes you back, whenever you need it. You're safe. You're enough. And you can return to presence, anytime you choose. Good night. Sweet dreams.